Hey, it's Dr. Marissa Lee Naismith here, and I'm so honored to be sharing today's interview round episode with you. Listen, and you will be inspired by amazing healthcare practitioners, voice teachers, and music industry professionals who will share their stories, knowledge, and experiences within their specialized fields to help you live your best life every day. As singers, our whole body is our instrument, and our instrument echoes how we feel physically, mentally, and emotionally. So don't wait any longer. Take charge and optimize your instrument now. Remember that to sing is more than just learning about how to use the voice. It's about a voice and beyond. So without further ado, let's go to today's episode. At present, not only are we in the midst of a global pandemic, but we are also in the midst of a mental health crisis that is affecting people of all ages, including children from all around the world. The RUOK organization is a non-for-profit self-harm prevention organization that encourages people to stay connected and have meaningful conversations with others who are going through the most difficult times in their lives before they reach crisis point. September 9th is RUOK Day, which is a day this organization seeks to raise awareness on the importance of creating a culture around support, connection, and caring in the workplace environment and beyond. As we launch into RUOK Week, we revisit some of the interview rounds where the guests speak candidly about their own self-care regimes. In this episode, we're going to listen to Dr. Elizabeth Blades, Dr. Wendy LeBorgne, Dr. Gillyanne Kays, and Jeremy Fisher, Lisa Popeil, Dr. Geneva Williams, and Ashlie Amber as they share their personal stories, experiences, and philosophies on the significance of self-care from a physical, mental, and an emotional health perspective, and how their regimes of self-care have made a positive impact to their lives. It is our hope that these stories will help to inspire change and encourage others to embark on their own journey of self-care, as well as to raise awareness for the RUOK organization. Without further ado, let's go to today's episode. Dr. Elizabeth Blades takes us on an incredible journey as she opens up and gives us an honest account of some highly personal challenges she has been confronted with. Elizabeth shares her regime of self-care and how this program of self-care was crucial to her healing journey in the midst of her inner turmoil. Elizabeth so generously offers us her life philosophies and how this has kept her steadfast throughout all the chaos and the anxiety she has experienced. I interviewed Elizabeth in episode 2, and in my interview, I was very eager to learn about the moment in her life when she began her journey of self-care, and this is what Elizabeth had to say.
I've always been an athlete, and I've always been not a health nut, but I've always eaten well, high nutrition, came from a very active family. Athletics, music, and education were the three parts that were very much emphasized in my life. And I just, barreled into everything I did. 30, 40 years of just being high energy and getting things done and making my to-do list and just be very active. And I started, I guess I'm going to have to say, I don't think Marissa knows this, but tragically my dad drowned at the age of 80. He was at his beautiful hunting camp, which he adored, up in the hills of Western New York State. And it was the first day of deer hunting, day after Thanksgiving. And he never came home. And my mom didn't think much about it because he often would stay over. Those were the days before cell towers, before cell phones. When he went to camp, he was off the grid. But he often would stay Friday night, Saturday night, come home Sunday. He never came home Sunday. So she sent my brother to find him, and he was floating in the pond. We still don't know how he got there. It was very cold. He used to go out and check the temperature of the pond. He was an engineer, and he kept meticulous records. And he probably was going to close the camp down that day. He may have slipped, hit his head, fell in the water, and that was the end of it. And it was, of course, the whole family was just devastated. And at that point, I started having dreams like a month after he died, where I wouldn't see him in the dream, but very vividly, I'd be talking to my mother in their bedroom here in the house that I now live back in. That's another story. And the phone would ring and I would pick it up, and it was Dad, and he would talk to me. And it was amazing because you could hear his voice. And he said, Bets, I just want to let you know this is amazing over here. The only two things you take with you are knowledge and love.
Wow.
And then
profound.
Yes. And those dreams continued.
How long ago was this?
November of 1990. And the rest of the family, I shared it with them, but I don't think they quite, it's like, okay, there she is. She's kind of the weirdo one of the family.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, I felt compelled to start really taking a spiritual journey of health healing. I took a workshop it was a week-long workshop in healing modalities. And that I was told that I had a lot of energy for healing. And so that really set me on a whole different course in my life, in my profession, with my family, my children. And so that just has been the underpinning of my life ever since that tragedy.
Okay. And for a lot of people, they would think that was a little left of center. And a lot of people would not be open to that kind of thinking. Did you find that with your family to start with?
Well, at first, yes, but they have since come to really respect me because I have moved ahead and trained myself in Reiki, which is healing energy.
Yes.
I've taken courses in meditation, which I now teach, body, mind, spirit kinds of modalities, really, immersed myself into it. And I'm the youngest in the family. And it's really interesting. My sister's 5 years older. My brother's 3.5 years older. They're starting to listen to me now. It was always, oh, Betsy, the little kid. And now I'm the one that's telling them, this too shall pass. Or I'll be saying, you can't force things. If it's meant to be, it will happen. And I'm always right.
Yeah, and some people can't hear that because everyone feels that they need to be in control of everything that's going on around them. And to just allow things to happen is not what we're basically programmed to do. We want to take charge, and we're told we need to take charge.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's the egoic mind, as opposed to the subconscious mind, which is much smarter, much more intuitive, of course. A couple of statistics, and this has been researched. The egoic mind, which Maribeth Dame, who is the chorus singing guru, she would say, and it's been proven, that peanut brain, because it's about the size of the peanut, is a control freak. And that's what always wants to take charge. And that part of your brain is actually much, much less, it's slow, comparatively speaking. So it takes about 40 bits of information 1 second for that brain to work. Yeah. Whereas the superconscious, the subconscious, what we would call the intuitive brain, 11,000 bits per second. But the egoic mind will get in the way. It will step in and just say, out of the way, you are not going to be making this decision because you're just, that frou-frou thing. So I have learned to really understand when my left brain, and I know that brains research, there's now saying there's no such thing as left brain, right brain, but I still use that terminology because it makes sense to me.
Yep.
The part that is the analytical brain, the part that wants to assess and judge is the part that really needs to be pushed out of the way and allow that intuitive subconscious brain to run the program. And it's very hard for that to be done. And that's in singing. People are constantly judging as they're singing.
Yes.
And they get in their own way.
Yes.
They're constantly
true.
How am I sounding? How am I sounding? How am I sounding? And it's like, just stop thinking about how you sound and pay attention to where's my breath? How is my alignment? The things that your left brain can be in charge of rather than getting in the way of the computer that actually should be.
So along your journey of life, there was a story that you shared with me, and I'm not sure whether you're comfortable sharing it with our audience or not, where your life went into turmoil. It was turned upside down. And you had to rebuild your life again. And that was a time that you had to really step up all your self-care and put all those practices into place. And they became even more important than ever to you.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about that experience?
Without going into a lot of details, I'm actually writing three books on the subject. So just to put it briefly, my entire existence, my life, my daily being, everything that I was assuming would be going on and on and on forever and very comfortable, got blown up completely, devastatingly. I was evicted from my home, my marriage, and everything that I had been doing for 10 years as far as my musical work, my teaching work, directing musicals, all of that. And I had to escape. I was targeted for assassination.
How did you find that out, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, where I lived was at 9,000 feet in the Rocky Mountains, and people who don't know enough about the mountains drive down roads and go off into the river and get killed. And when my brakes started failing as I was driving on that mountain road, and I knew that it wasn't something that I had done, and then I would be taking a nap and I could tell somebody was in the house with me that had no business to be in the house. Oh, it was like the universe was saying, or God was saying, or whatever you want. Like, alert, alert, alert.
Right.
Get out. Get out.
Well,
and so I did with the help of my son.
But, good on you for doing that. You read those signs and you did something about it, because a lot of people don't, and things don't end well.
It was terribly painful, and I was willing to stick it out and say, I'm staying. You can't get rid of me that easily. But my son, who is a Army major, retired on ready reserve or whatever, very smart guy, I told him a little bit of what was going on. He said, Mom, get out of there. Don't you understand? You're going to be the next statistic if you don't get out of there. And so he found me an apartment in Winchester. And the week before Christmas, I packed my cat and myself and a folding couch, or a folding cot, and a folding not even a cot, a folding table and a folding chair, and drove 3 days across the country from Colorado to Virginia. I was in a state of shock. I mean, I felt like I was in survival mode.
Yep. You wouldn't even remember that drive.
No. And it was not an easy drive. It's all across the United States, basically.
Yes.
But once I got to my apartment in Virginia, oh my God, it was, I won't even go into the details. It was really, really hard and really sad. I was in an empty apartment with my cat and the chair and the cot, the table. I didn't even have a bed. I slept on the floor until I finally went out and bought an air mattress. So little by little, I just kind of went into a shell. I did have a therapist back in Colorado. So we started doing Skype or Zoom kinds of therapies. And she also said that the statistics of how many women are murdered in abusive marriage relationships. So I got out, and at first it was I can't even remember how bad that time was. I had no purpose. I had no, I had no understanding of what just happened. He filed for the divorce the day right after I drove out of the driveway. I wasn't even out of our town. He went down and filed for divorce. Anyhow, so eventually, again, the right people come into your life, and I started. My son sent me a friend who knew somebody who was my age that lived in Winchester. She came in and just sort of swooped me up and said, "We're going to go out, girl. We're going to, you can meet my friends." I met Karen Keating at Winchester at Shenandoah University because she was the choir director at the church I started going to. And I started singing with the choir. And she's the one that said to me, "Betsy, we need somebody to come and teach these courses at Shenandoah. Are you interested?" And all of a sudden, within the space of a year, I had a feeling of like, okay, I'm going to be okay. And then I was able to write, I had plenty of time. I did the second edition of those two books, which I probably would never have done. I wouldn't have had the opportunity and the time. But because 2017 I was teaching, but not that much, I had a lot of time to revise both Singing with Your Old Self and A Spectrum of Voices and update them.
So that's not that long ago. So what
No.
we're talking about that happened to you is not that long ago. Did you find that having that regime of self-care, that helped you through that process? If you didn't have that, how do you think you would have fared?
I'd probably be a very bitter divorcee who would not be very pleasant to be around. So what I did, Marissa, is I just sat down every single morning and I said, I need to just have a routine. When I get up in the morning, I don't want it to be I'm sitting in this small apartment in a town. I don't know anyone. And I got this whole horrible divorce, which went on for 13 months. It was a Kardashian divorce. They got themselves a shark lawyer who just raked me over the coals. All I wanted to do is just get it over with and move on.
Yeah.
So I would get up in the morning and Kitty and I would go and I would sit in, it was a very pretty living room, or in the nicer weather out on I was on the third floor. So I had a little balcony porch. And I would sit there, have my coffee, and then I would actually do some meditation, get myself really focused and centered. And I just developed a morning, I call it my angel time, because I feel, as you can see in my background up there's a whole lot of angels. You see them?
Yes.
They're actually, that's left from Christmas. But anyway, so I would really tune into higher consciousness, universe. I had some books that I was reading through. One was Wayne Dyer's The Tao Te Ching.
Yep.
That was tremendously, I didn't make myself, but I said, I am going to read a chapter a week. And there's like 82 chapters. So I said, a chapter a week. Well, that'll take me through the first horrible year. And maybe by the time I get finished with the book, I'll be much more centered and grounded and have a happier life. And you know what? I did.
Dr. Wendy LeBorgne shares with us what self-care means to her and how her own regime of self-care has helped her find balance in her life as a woman with a highly successful career, as a wife and mother. She speaks openly about her morning ritual of meditation, prayer and exercise that helps her set up her day, and how this regime of self-care has helped her survive the effects of the pandemic. This is what Wendy had to say in episode 17 when I asked her about her daily self-care regime.
Oh my gosh. So this has been a year, for all of us, but a year of change, certainly for me. Mm-hmm. I've pivoted a little bit in my career from strictly doing clinical to now combining some clinic with really working with high-level vocal athletes back on tour. So for me, that means also I really take time for myself every day. I am an early riser, not a night owl. So I get up usually most days between 5 and 5:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And I meditate, and
Mhm.
I am a faithful person, so prayer is part of what I do, separate from
Yes.
meditation.
Yes.
And then I'm a person who likes to start my day with also exercise. Now, I do these separately
Mhm.
because even though I love to multitask, I don't find that is best for my self-care. So truly,
No.
like
No.
I'm actually I'm sitting in my meditation chair here. Like this is where I
Oh,
sit in the morning, because in my private space. But yeah, I do that, and I do it every day. And then exercise for me, walking is something that I do,
mhm.
and strength training. Um, I meal plan for my family for the week. So usually my Saturdays and Sundays, I try to meal plan um, for healthy foods, as well as budgeting. It works better if I meal plan and don't go
Yes,
out. Um,
absolutely.
but really, even over the course of a week, looking at, you know, fish one night, or a meatless meal one night, and then chicken or pork, so that we have the variety in what we do. And we work on that as a family too, because I think it's important. My boys are still young, and so incorporating that into what hopefully they'll take out. I have really minimized my social media. I actually
Mm,
block time. I
mhm,
block time in my day
mhm.
where I will allow myself to look at social
Yes,
media.
I'm hearing you.
Um, but I've cut back on my social media consumption and posting too.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it
The
gets a
same
little
here.
overwhelming, honestly.
Mhm. It does.
So
No,
those are
it's
some things I
true.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not only does it affect your mood, but also too, you can be stuck there for such a long period of time. You can get suckered in to being on social media for hours if you let it. I mean, it's just one big funnel. It's like a cave, and you get to a point of no return. But you're in a position of service. What you do, you serve others. Basically, as singing teachers, we are in an area of service. You're a mum, you have two boys, 11 and 16. You're a wife, a professional, a voice teacher, an author. You have so much on the go. How do you juggle all these roles?
Sometimes better than others. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie.
yeah,
Um, and you know, I'm really lucky that I have a supportive husband, right?
yes.
We'll be married for 25 years in
Oh,
July.
beautiful. Same.
So I know it's so
Just over
exciting.
25. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
I, I am I think that juggling it all, as a mom and as a woman and as a wife, the older I've gotten, I think my priorities have shifted a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And what was important at 20 is not as important in my 40s, or it's just shifted. And I don't think you can have it all at the same time. I think that there is a huge cost to yourself
Yes.
if you try to do that. And
Yes,
I've learned that the
definitely.
hard way for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Um, uh, so as I take on some of these new roles and new responsibilities in my own business, um, working on that balance, because if there's anything I've learned, I don't want to go back to that crazy, crazy rat race.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
block time for I block time for writing, trying not to overcommit,
Yes.
saying, okay, I
Yes.
need to get this project done before I commit to 6 others,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, and so I think that's how you work on the balance. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that I don't, it is an ongoing learning process.
Yeah. And it's learning to say no as well, isn't it? Sometimes. And that's so hard for us, especially as voice teachers, because we want to please everybody. We want to make everyone happy, and we're all fighting for our jobs. And so we don't like to say no. And as you transition, just say you've been to the office and your clinic for the day, and then you come home. How do you transition then back into being a mom and a wife? Like, there's a segment intending. I don't know if you've heard of it, where you set the intention for what you're going to do next. Like, do you go through something where you go, okay, now I'm home and now this is the person I'm going to be? Or do you naturally just go through that transition from one role to another?
I think I probably should transition better. And I'm not going to, there have been times where my commute before COVID was, it was up to an hour and a half some days. And so that time I listened to audiobooks, or there are times when I would come home and I'd sit in my driveway and I would truly do like a 2-minute meditation reset before I walked into the house.
Okay.
Because it is, sometimes that happens. Sometimes I have to put a sign on my in-house office door that says, leave me alone, right? Just, I need 10 minutes, because I will come in here and just, reset.
Good on you. Because my next question was, how do you take a breath during the day? Like, there's times where you just said that you say, just leave me alone for 10 minutes. And we all need that. And it's hard, isn't it, with family? I know that my husband will follow me around the house, or if my kids are here or my grandkids, like, you need to be able to say that, don't you? Or put that sign. I need a sign, but I need it to be big, because he would not get it.
Well, and it's so funny. Like, this even just happened this morning in my world is, I get up, I'm doing my routine. The kids are home for summer now, and my husband's a teacher, so he was also home. Today was my first day back from vacation. So I came in my office. I sat, it's like 7:00 in the morning. Like, everybody should not be bothering me.
No.
I'm trying to answer the emails from the last week. And my husband's literally trying to have a conversation he's like sorting things in here. I'm like, okay, it is now time for me to be at work in my little office here. And so, sometimes it's just creating some boundaries.
It is hard, isn't it? Like, my husband, I get home from work, from teaching, and then I like to have some creative time where I just sit and work on a passion project, and generally be some creative writing, working on this podcast. And, I might only be in here 15 minutes and I get, "Now, you going to make the salad, or do you want me to make it?" Like, it's like, leave me alone. I mean, literally, I would like to tell him where to place the salad, but I don't, but they don't like to leave us alone. It's like, what do they do without us? Bless.
That's right. That's right. And, and I enjoy my time, and wind down time. Like, when I literally block time on my schedule, like tonight, it's morning your time, it's nighttime for me. But I block time in my schedule, and I go, okay, at 8:45, I'm doing 15 minutes of core work, because I'm trying to get a little core work in the morning, core work at night. And then I have reading time for myself. And reading for me can't be so much on my phone or my iPad. I like actually like an actual book to read, right?
Oh, really? Oh, good on you. I'm an audio.
I do like, when I walk, I listen to audiobooks, or if I read on my phone, these are like blue light glasses, because I just find that it keeps me awake. Over this last year, I've always been a person that sleeps from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Like, I'm just a good sleeper. And this year has rocked that. And I find myself waking up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, and I just go, okay, we need to reset what this is. So I've made some changes coming into later in my evening to be able to do that.
Yes. Do you find now that you need that time to prepare to go to sleep, almost like some way of getting off social media or getting off your devices, time that you start to wind down and you don't look at emails and things like that? Is that the kind of thing that you're doing?
Yeah, I've made a really conscious decision that, when I'm done at 6:00, that I am not looking at any more emails. I don't check social media. I make a very conscious decision first thing in the morning that I don't, my phone is my alarm clock, right? It's like everybody else.
All of us.
But I make a really conscious effort in that first hour of getting up that I am not looking. I'm not looking at the news. I'm not looking at my email. I'm not looking at social media.
Yes.
But every day it's a struggle. I'm not going to lie, right? Like
it is.
I have to make this decision to do it. And that the first emails that I send in the morning are emails that I have intention to send. Like I wanted to reach out to somebody versus being at everyone else's beck and call and start my day with answering everybody else's emails, because then I find that I never get to the ones that I need to do.
Together, Dr. Gillyanne Kayes and Jeremy Fisher are known as Vocal Process, the power couple who have come to truly understand how to manage their personal and professional lives. They explain how personal self-care and finding balance is crucial for sustainability in all areas of their lives. They offer a unique insight into how they recharge and recalibrate on a daily basis in order for their minds to flourish on a deeper, more creative level. I interviewed Gillyanne and Jeremy in episodes 6 and 7 regarding their work and their relationship boundaries and how they manage to navigate their roles as business partners and as a married couple. And this is what they had to say.
Let's be honest, it's not a picnic. Having a 24/7 relationship that includes the business.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not a picnic. I mean, every couple who runs a business together has to navigate that.
There's something that we've learned over the years, and it has taken years, which is, what does the other person need to switch off? I fought the fact that you did meditation for a long time.
Yeah, I do transcendental meditation and I do it every morning.
And it was really annoying to me because it's like, no, I need your attention right now.
We're sitting up in bed.
Yes, I was going to say, you're such a male.
But it's really interesting because there are certain things that I need. I've got the sort of energetic level that will peak fairly high and stay there, and then will drop really quickly. And so the thing that I do to switch off in this circumstance is I will go away from the computer and read a book.
Right.
And it will be a fiction book. And it will be a gentle fiction book that I've read 10 times before. It's just to get me back into, well, oddly, it's to get me back into Fantasyland, which is really weird.
Well,
when normally you do things to ground yourself.
But you're going
in
into
reality.
daydreaming. It's daydreaming mode.
Yes.
It's allowing your brain to process. And, that's so important. I've got to say that the way I come down has changed because I'm someone who's been, we're both quite driven. I think it's fair to say.
No. Nonsense.
How many books and how many podcasts and how many pop-up workshops? No, you're not driven.
Yeah.
Are you?
No.
No.
How very dare you?
Yes.
No, absolutely not.
Well, we are. I used to tend to, I've got my list of things and I'll work through it and I'll keep working through the day. I'll take my lunch break, etc., etc. What's happened now, because I've had a health challenge, as you know, is that that's changed. And I've found out that what works for me best is to have a 30 to 40 minute walk in the morning. to have my yoga sessions. I've been doing yoga for 30 years as well. To have my Feldenkrais session, to take 2 hours off in the middle of the day. And so I'm actually having to learn how to manage my work life in a different way. Because I think what happened for me, you probably went through this. You're writing up your PhD, you're working. So, we're working full time. We're running a business. No other money comes into the household.
We're both freelancers, so that makes a big difference.
Yes.
Except from what we do.
We have to keep working.
And I'm spending 2 years writing up a PhD. And you go into override and you stay constantly into override. And you don't know. It took me a couple of years to realize that I didn't have to be an override anymore. These things take their toll. It's all right when you're 26 doing your PhD. It's not so much fun, when you're coming up to 60.
Yes.
I'd already got it by the time I was 60. But
yes, but I'm hearing you. I went through exactly the same thing, and that's where this whole podcast has come from, is because my own self-care journey and things that I've had to learn to do in order to ground myself as well. So I'm totally hearing you and empathizing wholeheartedly. So therefore, for both of you, you must then need time away from each other, like space and time to breathe and to dream. You were talking about dreaming as a way of your self-care, brain space. That's the word that you used.
Yeah, it's about 18 months ago, I read The Organized Mind by Daniel Levitin. And at that point, I was really starting to think. I was getting very overwhelmed. I do all the social media, or I was doing all the social media apart from Twitter. At that point, I was in these Facebook groups. I was doing Facebook posts, and I was getting very overwhelmed with all of this.
It's a lot.
You see a Facebook post and you go, oh, right, so-and-so's doing that. Right, I'd better post something. Or somebody tags you. I got constantly tagged in things, for you to make a response. Then you make a response. And then what happens is you've made a response. This is what's so bad about Facebook and social media.
Don't get me started.
You want to see who's responded to your response and what have they said. I actually think that Facebook had a major contribution to my developing a heart condition.
I think they've had a major contribution to a lot of the stress and the anxiety that our human race is experiencing as a whole globally.
Totally.
Right now.
There's a really interesting moment where, as a human being, you go, I don't need Facebook to validate myself. And that's a very, very powerful moment where you go, Facebook, I use it, but I don't need it to validate myself. And suddenly it gets put a bit more into perspective and you stop being on it all the time.
I think in our case, it was that sense. There was a time when entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and small businesses like us were really starting to use Facebook in our profession. And I would say that happened about 4 years ago, 2017. And I think there was a huge race. That's what I felt, that there was some kind of a push and a race. I'm the top person. I know the most. This is my business. You must all come and work with me. That was all the underlying stuff,
Oh, you must all come and work with me to the exclusion of anyone else, because now you're mine.
Yeah, you're in my group, and so you're mine, and et cetera, et cetera. And you become very triggered by this. And that was one of the reasons why I read this book, because I'd heard about it from colleagues, The Organized Mind. And he talks about the need for the brain to daydream. And it's by daydreaming that you allow your creative self to flow. And it's one of the ways that when you're not sleeping, that you can allow yourself to process. And I have really enjoyed the experience of allowing myself to daydream, because the only time I used to daydream was in my meditation, when I would suddenly download a whole idea, like a whole workshop. And that was wonderful. And I was thinking about this the other day. I used to get my best ideas on the loo. Now, this is a bit tragic. This is a bit tragic.
And way too much information.
But I'm I'm serious. And suddenly I get an idea now because I have the brain space. I think my ideas are better. They're more creative.
I was going to say that creative space. Yes.
And a deeper level as well, rather than, I've just had an idea. I feel like you said this to us when we were in Australia. It was so sweet of you. You said, I think you're just about to start your prime.
Yes, and I did. I remember that.
I feel like mentally and creatively, I'm in my prime now, and it's a really great feeling.
I agree.
For me, it's having that enforced time off that I had to face that, developing a chronic health condition. And although it's not a pleasant thing to have, it's changed my life.
Lisa Popeil has successfully transitioned across a variety of roles within the music industry, and this is a rare insight into Lisa's personal and professional journey as a backing vocalist working with Weird Al Yankovic. Lisa shares the demands of being on the road, touring across every state of the US for a grueling 3 months, and how she managed to survive this difficult lifestyle and the performance demands as a touring singer. I had the great honor of interviewing Lisa in episode 11, and this is what she shared with us about her experiences on tour.
I knew it was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wanted to really soak it up. So I was in my 60s, and here's my first experience on a tour bus. It was the summer of 2019, and it was 3 months around the U.S. and Canada. It was a total of 67 shows.
Oh, my goodness.
65 cities. So there were a couple of places where he has a big fan base, particularly like Seattle, where we would do 2 shows a day. I can't remember where we also did 2 shows a day, but mostly it was one show. And the band that he works with have been with him for decades. And I started working with Al in the very beginning of his career. The second album, he wrote a song called Mr. Popeil. Again, long story about why he wrote Mr. Popeil.
That's so cute.
Some great photos available out there if you look hard enough of me performing with him. Recording with him. In fact, it was funny because his record label turned out to be the record label I had my deal with no connection.
Yeah.
So that was something. But so I've been on a lot of his albums over the years, and in 2018, he said, I want to do something different for my next tour, because he'd usually just gone out with the band. He said, for 2019, I want to have a full orchestra and a conductor and backup singers, because he never had backup singers. Would you like to come on the tour? And I had to think about it for a few seconds, because that would be a whole summer without teaching, and I didn't know how well I'd be, because I was planning to tour with Frank Zappa, and I was given this big talk about how warlike it is to go on tour, especially in the wintertime, because Frank would say, it's going to be 90 degrees on stage, it's going to be 40 degrees off stage. If you've got a fever and diarrhea, you don't leave the stage, So he was giving me this talk about the touring is like commando warfare. Those were Frank Zappa's words.
Yes.
So I had this idea of how hard it was going to be. Well, it wasn't, partly because it was like family. I brought in the 2 other girls, the 2 other backup singers. So I had a history with them. They were talented. We liked each other. We were committed to being there for each other. I knew the guys in the band. It was my first time on a tour bus, and I really took to it. I had no problem sleeping in that little thing. I called it a coffin because it was so small. And we were treated really nicely. We unlike other tours I've heard about. In other tours, things I've heard are things like, don't talk to the artist, or there was something else. You just don't complain, don't say anything.
Yes, especially a woman. Yeah.
Yes, this was more like family. And there was squabbling, it's because we're all a bunch of kooky people, but it was like family. And there was a lot of love. And Al is a very warm person. A lot of people don't realize what a warm, caring person he is. So he helped create an environment where we were all in it together. And the work was not that difficult. The challenge is that it wasn't hard on our voice. It was a 1.5 hour show. We were center stage, which was so amazing. We weren't off in the corner in the dark. I was right behind Al every night. There was a 40 to 60 piece orchestra behind me.
Wow.
And a conductor. And so there was no variation. I mean, there were problems with the in-ear monitors. That was very challenging because it sounded completely different every night. And I have no idea why. It shouldn't. So vocally, there was not a single problem. The only problem vocally, because I've been coaching Al through the last 35 years or whatever with his voice, and he started to lose his voice the first week.
Oh, really?
And he was really freaking about it.
Oh, yes.
And it was because he had had a lesson with someone else. Someone said, you got to go see this person in LA. And he'd come out of the lesson with what? Exercises, 40, like a CD of these really violent sounding. I mean, it was really loud and really rough on the voice.
Wow.
Because I think there's this myth, particularly among a lot of LA teachers, that if you just do your exercises, you'll be great. And I don't. I am a not exercise person. If you know how to sing, then rest your voice, do a little warm up, check your voice, see how it is, and then save it for the stage.
Exactly.
So I just said, here's what I recommend. I said, I would not do those exercises. You don't hear us warming up. If we're singing, it's because we want to sing. We're checking our voices out, but we don't have like a routine warm up. I said, just try it. Don't imagine you're already warmed up. Because after the show, he'd have maybe a 2-hour meet and greet. So he was using his voice there.
Yes.
And as soon as he stopped using that exercise CD, his voice was perfect for the rest of the tour. He never had a single problem. So to me, that just reaffirms this idea that there's this myth that warming up is everything. And to me, it is not. It is knowing how to sing and saving it for the stage, and then protecting your voice and using less voice, not more voice, to keep your voice when you have intense voice use. And he was 60, 61 at the time, and he would be screaming some of the songs. And then he's just got an amazing underrated voice, because he'll be screaming and growling one second, and the next he's singing this sweet ballad with this floating falsetto. Yeah, he's running around the audience doing handstands and running around and costume changes. One of the most difficult things was performing outdoors when it's 90 degrees and 90% humidity.
Yes.
Thank goodness I and the other ladies could wear little, but the guys had costume changes, including full neoprene, or for the Star Wars part, they were wearing wool. So they're, really, so the heat and the humidity of a summer tour was tough.
Yeah.
I had been very concerned about getting sick.
Yes, I remember this discussion.
I did get sick. I missed one night only, which for me was really good.
That's really good.
I only missed one night, Milwaukee. I had a fever and it was flu-y, I guess. And then I had a slight fever for another 6 weeks. When I say slight, I mean really slight fever for the next 6 weeks. And it's because we'd be on the bus. We'd be on the bus about midnight, 12:30. The bus would leave and it would drive to our hotels. And again, we were so lucky. We got our own individual hotel room at very nice places. I just love hotels.
That's excellent.
But we might get there at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or 5 or 6 or 7. Usually it was around 4 or 5 we would get. But sometimes it was 3 a.m. And then we'd have to quickly wake up if we were sleeping.
Yes.
Dress, get out, get your suitcase, get into your hotel room and go back to sleep. So we were getting a ton of sleep. Us girls might get together in the beginning of the tour. We'd get together for lunch, or 1 o'clock. We'd go and see the sights together. And then the van would pick us up around 4 or 5, about 4 o'clock, to take us to the venue with the band. But as the tour went on, we just stayed in our rooms, and you could just sleep until the van picked you up, basically, if you wanted to. So sleeping a lot was not an issue. Having privacy and quiet and a lovely environment, not an issue. We had to eat. We didn't have lunch provided. So you had to figure out what you were going to do about eating during the day. But then when we'd get to the venue, it was all catered, and they had a whole vegan section, and they had a whole non-regular carnivore section. The food, for the most part, was fantastic. And then the show, usually 8 o'clock, 8:30, we'd start singing, because the orchestra played for half an hour. Then we'd sing from 8:30 to 10, and then there was the meet and greet if we wanted to go, or we could just go back to the bus. So sleep was not an issue. And I'm really grateful. But even so, I was fighting something, and it was fatigue. I was so blessed, though, because many of the days that I had this fever, it would dissipate at night. And so by the time I'd get on stage, I wasn't 100%, but I didn't feel like I had a fever. And I felt like I was living this, it was a natural thing. I'd stand off stage, look at thousands of happy faces, whether it was in some indoor fabulous movie palace from the 1930s, or whether we're outside. Every day was just, I can't believe this. And the fans just love him, and they're good people. These aren't violent people. They're all a bunch of nerds. And Al, for them, is somebody who's basically, the message is, it's okay to be different. It's okay to not be beautiful. It's okay to be smart. It's okay to be a nerd. And they're so appreciative. And I'd get people backstage, and fans. I'd meet super fans, and I'd get them backstage and get to meet them. And some memorable moments, like one couple said, "Lisa, this is just another show for you, but for us, this is one of the greatest experiences of our lives, and one that we will cherish forever."
Dr. Geneva Williams shares her personal philosophy on self-care, with an emphasis on the benefits of running from a physical, mental, and emotional standpoint. She explains that running is a time where she gains perspective on life. Genevora tells us that after her mother died, running was a way for her to escape the grief and the ordeal of her tragic loss. She describes her deep appreciation of nature and these things that we all take for granted. Genevora was my guest in episode 5, and I started out by asking her about her dancing throughout her childhood.
So, Genevora, we're going to talk about self-care briefly, because ultimately, other than talking about the voice from a holistic perspective, I feel that self-care comes under that banner. And you didn't play sport, as you said earlier, as you were growing up, and you weren't into exercising, but you were into dancing. That's still a form of sport, and you ask any dancer that. And
I cycled everywhere. I mean, that was my way of getting anywhere. And if my friend lived 10 miles away, I would cycle to their house. So I did get out and about. I was quite fit.
Oh, good.
I just wasn't skilled. There was the difference.
Okay. Yes, I can relate to that. But you run now. You shared with me that you participated in a half marathon or a marathon, or you're training for one. Was that no?
Oh, I've done several half marathons. And in fact, I quite often run a half marathon at the weekend. I always do a slightly longer run at the weekend, and sometimes it's a half marathon. So to me, that's not a big deal particularly, but I've never done a full marathon.
And what benefits do you find from running? How does it make you feel, and how does it impact on you physically and mentally?
Well, mentally it's running away a lot of the time. It's leaving things behind. It's getting out. I run in the hills and I've always got a view, which puts life in perspective. Things move. When you're out in the countryside, the landscape around you is changing, but it's changing slowly. So there's not a huge amount of distraction and your mind can go off and wander and process things. I don't listen to music when I'm running. I just run. I listen to the birds and I listen to the water and I listen to whatever's around me. It's very, very therapeutic from that sense. But even then, all right, I'll tell you a story. I was training for the London Marathon back in 2013 for the 2014 marathon. And I was training and I was running and I was getting really good pace. I was, doing an hour of hilly run and getting 7 miles under my feet in that time. And, really, I was going to be in the elite, outcome for the marathon. I was absolutely going for it.
Go.
And then I got an injury and it was a catastrophic onset of plantar fasciitis, which can be anything from a little niggle to, in my case, I couldn't actually put weight on my foot for 3 months. I couldn't walk for 3 months. And that came about when I looked back and thought, why did that injury build? Because injuries build over time. They don't just happen. They build over time. And it was because 6 months previously, my mother had died of cancer and I'd been nursing her through that. Oh. And my way of coping was to run. So I was running, but I was running with the additional baggage of that anxiety and that grief and that anger and all of those feelings you feel when you're bereaved. Mm-hmm. And I was putting all of that into my running, and my poor body, after a while, just said, "Oh, hang on, I can't do this," and it broke.
Mm-hmm. And that's what happened.
So there's your biopsychosocial model. I was using running as a way of dealing with grief, but then I took it too far.
Mm-hmm. And how do you go in terms of sleep and nutrition? And do you meditate?
Meditation, I think, is probably my running. Mm-hmm. That's when I go into headspace.
Yeah, mindfulness.
Yeah. And I do, as I say, I don't listen to music. I just watch the world around me. Nutrition, I love food. I love food and I love cooking. So that's easy because I cook everything from scratch and I get an organic veg box delivery every week. I've been a vegetarian for nearly 40 years.
Really? So, what encouraged you to do that?
Oh, a combination of factors. Mostly at the time, all meat was factory farmed and I didn't like the idea of factory farming. And the environmental concerns of producing more meat than we needed.
Yes.
Even then, we were very aware of the fact that it used too much land and too much resources. So that was what sort of flipped me over. And then you get into the habit of it. And now I really can't stand the taste and smell of meat. I just couldn't do it. Even if I knew it was the happiest animal in the world before it died.
Yes.
I've always cooked meat for my children, if that's what they want.
You don't eat it yourself.
Yeah. No.
That was a very scrunchy face then. That was very convincing.
Well, vegetarians often say that the thing that turns them is the smell of bacon cooking. Now, for me, the smell of bacon cooking is one of the most disgusting smells I can think of.
Yes, I can't say I eat a lot of bacon, but I don't mind a steak, to be perfectly honest.
But I think it's habit. I think after a while you just get into the habit. But that's fine. It's not a bad habit.
Being Italian, I could probably live off pasta.
Yeah.
I probably do okay. And tomatoes. We have to have tomatoes. Italians love tomatoes.
Yeah.
Now.
Or we'll start dribbling.
I know. So I do know you shared with me also that you had a COVID experience yourself.
Mm.
You had the virus. So how was that for you? How did you find out, and where do you think you contracted the virus from?
Well, I know exactly where I got it from. My son brought it home from school.
Well, that was rude.
I know. So he came home and on the Monday, he suddenly said, "I can't taste or smell anything."
Mm.
And so immediately we booked him in for a test and took him along, and sure enough, came out positive. And he was a bit grotty for a couple of days, but he wasn't that ill. He's 16, he's fine. And then, 4 days later, I started coughing and my daughter said, "Mum, go and get a test now." So I did. And I felt fine for a couple of days, felt okay. And then it sometimes hits you a bit later. So I think I was quite under the weather for 4 or 5 days. I didn't really get out of bed. I worked in bed with my laptop. I didn't give any singing lessons. I thought it wasn't really fair to give Zoom lessons in bed. So I was absolutely fine, really. But it takes that kind of viral infection can take it out of you. And I noticed it when I went back to running. 2 weeks after getting my positive test, you're allowed out. I thought, right, I'll go for a little walk. And I walked a quarter of a mile down the road, and I had to stop and sit down and breathe for a while and then walk back slowly.
Gee.
And this is someone who runs a half marathon every weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
so that's how much it can knock the stuffing out of you. And then you just do a slow build.
mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's when I got my rehabilitation hat on and said, don't be silly, take it slowly, be kind to yourself. You've done nothing wrong. You don't have to punish yourself. Just be gentle and be kind. So this is the self-care.
Yes. And what about the voice? What happened to your voice? Did it change? Did you find that, because I was talking with Elizabeth Blades a week ago, who also had COVID, and she said that she lost all her resonance. Did you find that anything happened to your voice through that time?
No, I didn't. But then I wasn't really doing much singing.
Okay.
So I think we notice changes in the things that we do the most,
Right.
and to the most specific level.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, a simple thing like running up 2 flights of stairs, which you might do every day of your life, that's where you'll notice the difference, because suddenly it'll be a struggle. And so this is where our this, again, good questions to ask. You know, where have you noticed a difference? What have you noticed that's different about your voice?
Yes. And from then to now, have you noticed that your energy levels are still not quite back to what they used to be, or have you fully recovered?
I think I have probably fully recovered. I'm still getting tired, but that's other things.
Mm-hmm.
That's just overworking.
Do you think that you being fit, physically fit, certainly, did that help your recovery process? Do you think that you recovered quicker because you were physically fit, or you are physically fit?
Well, yes, yes, I assume so. But then that's a difficult equation, because there are people who are physically very fit who've had a dreadful journey with COVID, who are still suffering a year later.
I think this quote that I've taken from somewhere on social media that was written by you is going to sum a lot. No, it was something that I found, and it's about your morning run, and it kind of ties all of this together. And it was my morning run, a thrilling chorus of birdsong, competing woodpeckers, the rush of water over the weir. Why would anyone want to replace this with man-made music? Has COVID forced you to change your outlook on life, or did you always have an appreciation for those things surrounding you? I was going to ask you that earlier, but you answered that, and I think you've gone beyond answering that question. I mean, that's such a beautiful quote.
And it was just in the moment. I remember writing it or thinking it. I thought it on the run and then wrote it. Actually, no, I wrote it on the run. I did post it on the run. Yeah.
Wow.
And because I was running along the river, and I could hear antiphonal woodpeckers. There was one over there in the woods, and there was one in the other woods over there. And they were obviously competing for a mate and showing off their thing. Yeah, with the woodpeckery noise. And it's such fun. You get that in the spring, and you just think, wow, I wouldn't have heard that if I'd been blasting my ears with something that I could have been listening to. And that doesn't mean to say that man-made music is inferior. It's just that there's a place for everything.
Yes. But I think underpinning all of that is a love for the environment and for nature and for serenity and the beauty of what we have without all those man-made things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very aware of how lucky I am to live in the countryside where I've got that. So that, you know, I'm lucky on so many fronts.
Ashlie Amber began performing on cruise ships as a production cast vocalist. Eventually, she created her headliner show, I Will Always Love You, a breathtaking tribute to vocal legend Whitney Houston. Ashlie shares her story on the demands of ship life as both a production cast vocalist and a headliner entertainer with a grueling travel schedule. Ashlie describes how she learned to manage these demands through a strict daily regime of self-care. This is part of my fascinating interview with Ashlie from episode 9.
I know you were really self-disciplined because I've actually, we've crossed paths on 2 different ships, and I know how you take care of yourself so well. But it can be hard because for you especially, and I've been with you when you've just casually wanted to go and grab a coffee, that as soon as you leave your cabin and you're in a guest area, people want to talk to you. And so your voice is not cutting a break. And then not only that, but what listeners may not know is that after a show, you have meet and greet with guests as well. So you've just done all this work. This could be after your first show, you have a 9:00 show to come. It's 8:00 and you're out there talking to guests after your first show. And then you have another show to follow. And then you've got to come out again. Then you have to go to bed and kind of do the whole thing again.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and you really learn what your limits are and what you can do. I think probably 95% of the time I would go out after every show. But every now and then if I'm sick, because we don't get sick days on ships. Like if you're a headliner or you're a cast member, we don't have understudies. So
no.
I never, called out of a main stage show, and I've only, I think, missed 1 or 2, theme nights off of 3 contracts in however many shows. So, calling out just really isn't an option. And for my own show, my Whitney Houston show, when I'm headlining, I don't get to call out. So sometimes I'm traveling for 36 hours doing an 8-hour, time change, different climate change. And I land and I have to perform that night. And you're like, I haven't slept, I'm dehydrated, and I have to sing Whitney. Yes. Why?
Yes.
Like, who did this?
Yes.
And every now and then those moments, you just have to take a step back. And I would be like, okay, so I can't do debriefs after the first show. I'll do them after the second show because I don't have to sing for 3 days after this. And you just kind of assess the situation. And again, you learn your voice and you say, okay, I'm not gonna be able to do my A show tonight. I'm gonna have to do my B show. And now B show doesn't mean I'm giving less energy. I'm still giving the same amount of energy. I'm emoting the same, but maybe instead of hitting that really high C, I'm not. I might just give a different, and I'll have an alternate backup that I can pull out of my pocket to save my voice because it's not quite there that day.
Yes. And I think when you and I first met, that was what you were wanting to learn from me was, what can I do to save my voice and to protect my voice and to give me longevity? And that's the kind of things we talked a lot about, strategies, and went through your whole day. What did your day look like? And checked in with a number of things that most singers don't think about when they're busy performing. They don't think about lifestyle and hydration and warming up, and cooling down was another thing. Yeah. And so you made the transition then to guest entertainer. So you were then going from ship to ship, doing your Whitney show, which was not a tribute show. It was a show inspired by Whitney Houston's music. It covered her music, and you did that so beautifully and so amazingly. Was there ever a time where you felt that you were running into problems?
Oh my gosh. Like every day. No, I'm just kidding. Not every day.
No.
It's very interesting because I kind of went through a vocal change, because when I started doing Whitney, I was in my late 20s. And then all of a sudden, here comes my 30s. And I noticed my body's changing. Like, I've always been a curvy girl, but all of a sudden I was like, hey, my hips are even bigger than what they used to be. Like, what's going on here? And which I'm all about, like, curves are in. Okay. There's nothing wrong with curves. If you're curvy out there, you strut them curves. I had to reteach myself how to sing. Now, again, I don't have a lot of training. I don't have a lot of things to fall back on. And so when you're that type of artist and you're that type of performer, you become really street smart. And I'm naturally street smart because of how I grew up. And so most singers, I wouldn't call them street smart. No. You have to learn to adapt. You have to learn how to absorb information when you can. So if I met somebody, or if I came across somebody that could give me any sort of pointers or tips, even if I took one thing from them, that's it. Mm-hmm. If I spent a couple hours with them and took one thing that helped me be better or feel more comfortable, that was worth my time. And that's exactly what I did. And I got to meet you. I got to absorb information from you. I got to see other performers perform. And I got to be like, oh, that's interesting that they're doing that and not that. Oh, that's interesting how they're doing, the arrangements. And that's interesting how they're doing this. And you just learn all these things that you're like, oh, if I can have the horns be my backing vocals, then that's a little less work I got to do. Yes. So when I'm singing.
Yes.
And so if I ask the sound guy, the sound operator for a little bit of a brighter gain, a little bit more reverb, and to make sure I'm boosted nicely in the house, that's less work I have to do. I can then rely more on my mix instead of having to rely on a belt. And because belt is where you get into trouble. Belt is where you get tired. Belt takes a lot out of you. And I'm a belter. I grew up a belter. When you're young, those muscles just want to work. But the older you get, it's harder and harder to produce that same sound. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I learned. I learned how to be smart, and I learned how to be street smart, and I learned how to absorb any information I could from anybody who I respected and anybody who was willing to give me information.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of A Voice and Beyond. Now is an important time for all of us to spread positivity and empowerment in our singing voice community. It's time for you to invest in your own self-care, personal growth, and education. Use every day as an opportunity to learn and to grow so you can show up for your students feeling energized, empowered, and ready to deliver your best. Be the best role model and mentor you can possibly be, and watch your students thrive as you do. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to share it with a friend or a colleague who you think will be inspired by this. Copy and paste the link and share it with the people you think will enjoy listening to this show. Please share it on social media and use the hashtag #AVoiceAndBeyond. If you would like to help me, please rate and review this podcast and cheer me on by clicking the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts right now. I would love to know what it is you enjoyed the most about this episode and what was the biggest takeaway for you. I promise you there are many episodes to follow, as I'm committed to bringing you more inspiration and conversations just like this one. I'd like to finish up with my final thoughts. Remember that to sing is more than just learning how to use a voice. As singers, our whole body is the instrument, and our bodies echo what we feel physically, mentally, and emotionally. So singing is not just about the voice. It's about a voice and beyond. Please take care of yourself, and I look forward to your company next time.